Welcome to today's Tech Solutions session. What does it all mean? Do skills provide better access to the job market than degrees now? It is my pleasure to turn it over to our session presenters.
Charlotte, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties. Can you all hear me now? Excellent. So good afternoon, everyone. Looking forward to a great session today and an interesting and vigorous discussion around skills. I'm going to kick us off today with introducing our distinguished panel, and then we'll get directly into our live discussion. So just in terms of introductions, we have several people that are joining us today for the panel, and it's my pleasure to introduce them. I will give a quick introduction to each person on the panel, and then we'll do a quick poll. So first off, I'd like to welcome Richard Varn. He is the CEO of RJV Consulting and has provided information technology and policy consulting to a variety of customers for over 32 years. He is currently a venture partner with the Learn Launch Accelerator Fund. He recently completed 19 years working with Educational Testing Service as a distinguished presidential appointee for 9 years and served 10 years on the ETS Board of Trustees. At ETS, he directed the Center for Advanced Technology and Neuroscience and led efforts on venture investing and innovation. His degrees and academic honors include membership of Phi Beta Kappa, a Bachelor of Arts with honors in political science, and a Juris Doctorate with distinction from the University of Iowa. Mr. Varn has received numerous awards and recognitions for his public service on behalf of education, fiscal reform, distance learning, technology innovation, and government management. I'd also like to welcome this afternoon Salvatrice Cuomo. Salvatrice has a unique perspective on what it takes for businesses to succeed by having worked in family businesses, publicly traded companies, and not-for-profits. While she started her career in retail management, her true passion was for small businesses. She began working for the Montebello Chamber of Commerce as their Director of Small Business Development, and then as Director of Pasadena Small Business Development Center, where she helped small business entrepreneurs make their dreams of starting a business become a reality by improving their business acumen. In 2017, she was appointed as the Executive Director of Pasadena Community College's Economic and Workforce Development efforts. Her responsibilities there include driving the college's strategy to supply a trained, flexible workforce that serves the region's labor market needs. Ms. Cuomo is currently a doctoral candidate at USC Rosier School of Education in Organizational Change and Leadership, has a master's degree in entrepreneurship and innovation from the USC Marshall School of Business, and a bachelor's degree from Cal Poly Pomona. Good afternoon also, and welcome to Dr. George Westerman, who works at the dynamic intersection of executive leadership and technology strategy. During more than 17 years at MIT Sloan School of Management, he has written 3 award-winning books, including Leading Digital, Turning Technology into Business Transformation. As a pioneering researcher on digital transformation, George has published papers in Harvard Business Review, Sloan Management Review, and other top journals. He is now focused on helping employers, educators, and other groups to rethink the process of workforce learning around the world. George is co-chair of the MIT Sloan CIO Leadership Awards, a member of the Digital Strategy Roundtable for the US Library of Congress, and faculty director for 2 executive courses at MIT Sloan. He works frequently with senior management teams and industry groups around the world. Prior to earning a doctorate from Harvard Business School, he gained more than 13 years of experience in product development and leadership roles. And last, I was going to say but not least, but just say last, myself, I'm the CEO and founder of Jobspeaker. I started Jobspeaker in order to help job seekers of any age, race, creed, color, or socioeconomic background gain access to the right information at the right time in order to make informed choices in education and their career. I've gained over 20 years experience in senior technology related roles in both the US and Europe, helped launch some key industry projects, including the first online banking system for Wells Fargo, the first online brokerage system for Charles Schwab UK. I'm a Sloan Fellow with an MSc in Management from the London Business School and a graduate in Computer Science from Dublin Institute of Technology. Okay, now I believe we have the introductions out of the way. We have some questions for you all that we'd like you all to participate in, please. Very simple questions, but if you could, Ashley, could you pop up the poll for our attendees so we could start getting some understanding of who's in the meeting today? Great. So far, we have overwhelmingly education institutions, which is fantastic. We have a few people from companies, also fantastic. We're gonna cover a little bit of both sides of the equation, as it were, and then we have someone else or somewhere else. Maybe you can post in the chat where you're coming from if you're not one of the first two groups, please. We have, I think we'll continue with this next question as well for educators. So quick poll 2 and poll 3. We'll just get through those really quickly. Does that make sense, Richard?
Yeah, poll 2 is just for educators. Let's pull that one up. And then for those of you in the education field, we'll be answering this one, and then we'll have an employer's poll next. So want to run number 2?
And in this one, we're just trying to get a sense of, your perspective of skills. How do you use skills today? Are you using them? And so we have a broad understanding of who's in the discussion and maybe how we can ensure that we're covering some of your questions in the panel today.
It's about to close, so hurry with your answers.
It's a pretty even spread with a larger group saying that they're essentially, I think it's fair to say that you're looking at it, it's on your roadmap, but no specific plans as yet. But interesting spread across the group.
Yeah, it's interesting. A third of you are actually either committed to it or doing it. So we have a comparable set of questions for the employers to see how you're using them in a variety of ways in hiring and promotion and other areas. So we can pull up poll 3 for the 11 of you who are employers, if you could answer this next question and see where you're at in your process. You have about, I think, 20 or 30 seconds to answer. And it's about to close, so there you go. Wow.
Wow. That's
great.
interesting. Yeah. Obviously, this is a topic that's dear to your hearts, or a lot of you.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you, Ashley. I think we'll kind of move on. I've already introduced Richard. Richard is gonna kind of kick us off now with a kind of overview of skills and where we're going, where we started, where we're going, and what does that mean for us today, particularly in a, I wouldn't say post-COVID-19 world, but in the middle of a COVID-19 world. What does that mean for us all, and how can we think about it so that he can tee up the panel discussion after that.
Great.
Take
Thanks,
it away,
Charlie.
Richard.
Pull up my first slide, and I see Youssef from Hawkeye Community College, and I used to work at UNI, and they'll recognize that this is the Iowa Capitol behind me. So anyway, I've been working on it since I used to work in this building for 20 years. So I've had about, since the 80s, I've been working on this, and I tried to summarize some of the insights that I have over those last 30 some years of trying to work on the area of skills, both in the voc tech area, education, workplace, and at the standards body level and elsewhere. So I usually talk about these more broadly as K-SAPEs: knowledge, skills, abilities, performance, and experience. And I would say that they've always mattered. It's just that we formulated them into larger blocks of currency. It's kind of like, trying to build a currency system. We call them degrees, credit hours, certificates, resumes, and licenses. But what's come to be is that we need smaller change. We don't just want somebody to try to pay for a Dr. Pepper at the Quick Trip with a tract of land. We want to have actually $1.95 for the Dr. Pepper. And what's that equivalency in skills in smaller units? So we've been working for the last 20, 30 years and trying to build out standards and tools and ways that we could identify what those specific things were. And we've generally just started calling them skills, although I think they represent a variety of those K-SAPEs. So I think we can use this deconstruction, and always had a passion for this, that we can build a better feedback loop to improve learning, make better guidance choices as individuals, as well as help people make better choices, do better jobs of admitting people to educational opportunities, hiring, development, and advancement. Next, please. And so we also are in the middle of a time when we have the shortening of shelf life. A lot of you have been tracking the fact that before this all recent events have happened, they were saying, oh, we're going to have to reskill a couple billion people in the world. George might even talk about having to reskill 1 billion people, and just MIT focus on that. And we already had that. And so we knew that this was happening, and then continually having to get new skills, upskill and reskill. It was already present. It's accelerating. And I think that we used to talk about lifelong learning as some sort of an aspiration. We wanted to do it through our life, and now it's, I think, become essential. And so we had this accelerant of the existing technology. We add to it, things that make labor existence, is it hard to get? Is it you have to spend more money to have labor? Then that tends to drive people's desire to change jobs, both in the ways that they structure the work and the ways that we pay for how many people we're willing to pay for having to do that, or how much we're going to rely on automation. So then ultimately skills become this shorthand in that economy. We're saying, I'm current. I'm ready to do the work you need to do today, and I can prove it to you. Next, please. It also creates a new market dynamic, I think, in this environment. Before, anything that you knew or learned or earned or were didn't give you any credit in the world of work or in the world of education in many ways. And that's been evolving. That innate and acquired skills can be valued today. And we have a lot of standards from IMS Global, from the W3C, from different rubrics and frameworks, some of which you're going to hear about today from places like JWell and MIT and others, where we can start to say, I know what that is, and I know how to validate that, and it's useful, and I can use it. Now the question, I know with at least 10 of you in workplaces, you're using those things to do your work. And a third of you educators are either doing it or about to. It also democratizes that partial degrees, life experience, other things can actually count for something. So it isn't that you always have to go through one door called an accredited institution and get a credit hour to be able to earn and learn and get something valuable in return for that. that more open marketplace means more providers that can provide more ways of being able to deliver innovative learning systems and solutions that detail what skills that people have, and they can document that, and those can be used. That also puts pressures on existing institutions to adapt their programs to be more adaptable, bite-sized, smaller, different than what they were before, and not just give the gross measures of learning in the form of degrees. So, and overall, in what the workplace tells us back and what the educators tell us from their academic standards, is we're trying to clarify what is actually valued so that value chain can be more efficient and effective, and we have greater accountability and ultimately more success for the people we're trying to help. That kind of summarizes the overview I wanted to give you, and I ran through that quickly. All these slides will be available to you later. With that, want to turn to the panelists now and let each of them give you maybe a couple-minute overview of where they're at and their thinking on this. And each of them have a lifetime of experience in working on these kind of questions. And George, I think you're up first, so we'll turn to you. And unmute yourself and rock on.
Thank you. So I lead workforce learning at a group called the Jameel World Education Lab, which is part of our MIT Open Learning group. You know, MIT's had some digital learning offerings going for almost 20 years, and then part of edX and others as we get going. And what we're trying to do with what we're doing here is find the right way to get the right skills to the right people in the right way at scale. Through digital and also hybrid approaches, there are three problems that we're looking to solve here in the workforce learning area. One is advice, helping people understand what is a good avenue for them to move, what skills could be useful for them. Learning is, you know, atomizing, personalizing, digitizing the learning so it comes to them instead of the other way. And in credentialing, recognizing something less than a degree as still being valuable. And of course, they're enabling infrastructure and tools. That's what we're in the business of doing, is trying to help transform workforce learning with some courses we're developing and an awful lot of research and infrastructure we're also going to try to build up in that area. If you could change slides. So just to give you an idea of the kind of things we're working on the left is a bunch of research, and in the middle, we're doing events and some frameworks we can talk about. So next slide. What I wanted to really focus on in this introduction is this idea of human skills. We have an awful lot of information going out there on STEM skills. There's justifiably real importance to that. Those skills are measurable, they're valuable, and they can help you improve your skills, your career prospects. What we often forget is the human skills. There's a well-known quote, I don't know who said it, you get hired for hard skills and fired for soft skills. And what we wanted to do here was think through what are these human skills that matter and how can we think about them. I want to share just two studies that we've done. And of course, there are many other studies that have happened out there in the world. Switch slides. So for example, you know, here the FT has done some studies over their survey work. And I just wanted to point out some of the things they talk about, the most important skills or the toughest skills to recruit. Working in a team, working with a wide variety of people, complex problem solving, maintaining a network, ability to influence others, drive and resilience. These are not those technical, not those hard skills. These are the softer skills. We don't want to call them soft skills because they're hard to do. But these human skills, these social skills are just so important. You'll see out of this list of 10, there's only one hard skill on there, big data. The rest of them are these more social skills. Change slides. So I want to share with you two studies we've done recently that just get at this idea. One is we've looked across all of the jobs in the economy, running some Labor Department data, and identified these 8 skills that run across all jobs. Now, other jobs have specialist skills in them, but all jobs have some element of this, more or less than average. And when we ran the numbers, we could put a value on these based on your average salary for being in jobs. And what we can say, if your job has more of this requirement in it, you'll make either more or less money on average than the average worker. If you can show the next slide. And what's interesting out of here is we see a range from the more your job involves touching things, on average, the wage is lower, to the more your job involves supervision or initiative, on average, your wage is higher. And these build up like Legos. So CEOs do a lot of initiative and supervision. They make a lot of money. Parking lot attendants don't have a lot of skills. They're less. And you know, the more you touch things, the less you get. If you can hit, there you go. look at these skills. These are the social skills that are in this set, the social, the human skills. And you can see, in general, these are associated with jobs that pay more money. The fascinating one, though, that isn't, is this idea of cooperation. We all say we want people that get along with other people, and yet the jobs that require more cooperation tend to pay a little bit less on average than others. And what are we thinking about? Retail, call centers, these kinds of things. What's happening is, as the middle of the skill distribution hollows out, my colleague David Otter has done some very interesting work on this. What we think is happening is, as the middle of the skill distribution hollows out, the demand goes for the two ends, the higher and the lower skills. And at the bottom end, if you can't do anything else, at least you can get along with people. And so you tend to move there. Somebody had asked, doesn't teamwork require getting along with people? Absolutely. What we're seeing here, though, is that the jobs that require a lot of getting along with people pay less. It's the other skills that are associated with more money. So that's just an interesting study. That's under review right now, brand new work. And then just if we can go another slide. Oh, and what this says is, over time, the skills that are growing in employment, the cooperation skills are growing in employment, but not in wage. The only thing really growing in wage and employment is these leadership, supervision, leadership kind of work. So, okay, if you can skip over, there's one more framework I want to show you. The other thing we did is we said, well, what are these human skills? And we went looking. Richard mentioned a bunch of them. There are many others. We found 41 frameworks for social, professional, human skills out there, 41 different frameworks. We synthesized those. You can see how often different skills show up in those 41 frameworks. And then we synthesized those. We did some good work with experts to sort them out, and we put them into a meta framework. And just want to share this because this is available for anybody to use if they want. If you can switch slides. This is our view on human skills that are important out there. The human skills you need to thrive in these dynamic, digitally empowered environments right now. What you'll see is this 2x2 in the middle, this framework across the 24 skills. The top is doing, the bottom is leading. The left is me, the right is other people. And so while the details matter about critical thinking, comfort with ambiguity, initiative, integrity, while those matter, this meta framework we're finding to be very valuable for people. Are you thinking? Are you interacting? Are you managing yourself? Or are you leading others? Is a tremendously important way. And one of the ways you can think about the social skills, the human skills that you're training or you're developing is, how well are you filling out that 2x2? And where do you want to add to that? So I'll stop there.
Okay. Teresa, you're up.
Good morning. What you see in front of you is our career center, what is typically known as a career center. We call it the Freeman Center because it was named after a donor. But how Pasadena City College really approached skills development, career services, and this is one of our pillars, one of the pillars under the economic and workforce development umbrella, is that we thought about, and we did a lot of research around how do we best position our talent to be competitive, and then the flip side of that, how do we engage employers in a meaningful way that allows them to share what their needs are and make that connectivity with talent and their needs. So it becomes this delicate dance, between what the needs of the employers are, which are changing constantly, and then also being a voice for the talent that we are producing, and working with our instruction and student services to make that happen. And so I share this with you in that, the Freeman Center was really designed with our stakeholders in mind, both the employers, faculty, and students. It was designed to serve the entire population of 26,000 plus students that we have at Pasadena City College. It was purposely positioned under economic workforce development so that we can see the lens, we can see it through the lens of the employer and the employees. Integrating multiple programs, not just career counseling, but work-based learning and internships and job placements, and, you know, really emphasizing preparations and skills and connectivity. And at the end of the day, you know, our role as an educator is to provide the skills and employ the skills to our talent so that they can compete, right? Especially now more than ever. And so that was really the design behind the Robert G. Freeman Center for, let me say it correctly, it's the Robert G. Freeman Center for Career and Completion. Very different, not just for career, but completion. We want to increase our employment rates. We want our students to, or we want to increase our completion rates. We want to continue to work towards closing equity gaps and skills gaps. And it was a response. I mean, this was an intentional response to our the chancellor's office around the Guided Pathways framework. Those of you from California who are familiar with the Guided Pathways framework, it's really an emphasis on guided entry and guided exit through a student journey, and position their students within a meta major, and you know, and helping them, guiding them through career from day one when they start at a community college. And that what the Freeman Center was designed to do that. The Freeman Center was designed, along with many pillars of the college, to have career conversations and career development preparations and experiences from day one. And it's not an afterthought when, oh, I'm 2 months into you know, graduating or completing, and I probably should like go visit the Career Center and do something. So it was really designed to start those conversations really early on. And then one of our successes really was thinking about it as a success team. So yes, we have multiple programming under the Freeman Center, which I'm sure I'll share throughout the Q&A here this morning. But we pride ourselves on developing success teams for each student. As the success team, each student has access to a success team, which includes a job developer. It includes a work-based learning coach, an internship coach, an academic counselor, a career counselor, and a completion coach. So they have, and every meta major, they have a team surrounding them, again, from day one until they leave our college and move on to bigger and better things. So, and also too, I mean, not only you know, as looking at the programmatic view of the Freeman Center, but also lastly, what I'll share with you is that it was very intentional in designing a center that streamlines communications with our business community, one central hub of communication, and really being a concierge of services.
Thank you, Salvatrice. I'll move the slides on here. So I'll just take a couple of minutes just to briefly describe, you know, why we thought this was an interesting conversation today. As it says at the top of the slide, you know, we look to bridge the skills gap between education and employment. But let me just take a second to say why. Our platform was, the genesis of our platform was back in the last recession. Arguably, we're now entering another recession, or I think it's official now, we are in another recession. But the genesis was around helping people navigate from where they are today. And in the last recession, there was many millions unemployed. There's now 40 million plus people unemployed. And so helping them understand how they get from where they are today to where they want to go in their career, and helping them essentially build the skills along that pathway. So what is Jobspeaker? What do we do? Jobspeaker is a platform that provides an integrated suite of tools to efficiently help guide students along and ensures learning across as they prepare for the world of work, right? Helping students essentially graduate faster because they're on the path. They know what programs and courses to take along that path. We can show them as they're succeeding along that path and earning skills along that path, which boosts retention and increases graduation rates. And Salvatrice mentioned guided pathways. So it's a platform that supports those guided pathways conversations from beginning. And I won't say end, because it's an ongoing relationship that you have with your students, who then become employers, alumni, potentially adjunct professors at your school. And so it's a lifelong relationship between you and that student, your college, your university, and that student. And it's a mutually beneficial, right? So you're building a relationship with that student as they go into the workplace, and they're building a relationship with you as they're looking to essentially build skills over their lifetime. So that's why we thought it was an interesting discussion to bring to you all today. And I'll now hand it off to Richard to kind of get the discussion, liven up discussion with more.
Sure. You know, you've all raised some really interesting questions about, you know, how do we get the learner engaged and how do we guide them properly? So I really want to ask you, like, you know, what is in this skill economy and in the current crisis, what's the right role for guiding people, whether they're within a career guidance approach, you know, in an institution, or if it's a development approach in a company? And then generally, how does that relate to the existing career services? George, I know you've been doing some research on this, not published yet, but maybe you could kick us off and give us an idea of what's the right way to approach guiding people these days and getting them on the right pathway. You're on mute, George.
One of the things we know is that people don't stay in their same jobs forever anymore. We also know that my children are going to have a longer career than I will. I'll retire at 65 or 70. They may go much longer than that. And the other thing we know is that if you have 10 people in a job, one of them can move to the supervisory role, the other 10 can't. Right? The other 9 can't, because there's only one supervisory role out there. So there's a tremendous need out there to help people understand the horizontal opportunities that are available for them, either because they just want to grow and move on to something else, or because they've just lost a job or been dead-ended and they need to find something else. So right now, those opportunities, those mechanisms don't exist. People rely on their friends. Their friends don't know much more than they do. Companies know a little bit about what's in the company, but not at other places. And employers, supervisors, there's an awful lot of bias, even among the good ones, in giving that advice. So there's a huge need out there to help people build and to understand, if I have this set of skills, what are other positions that are close in those skills, but not quite there, that I could move to? For example, if you are a laid off accountant, what else could you do? Well, certainly you could learn how to program, because that's the answer we give to everybody. But it turns out that accountants actually make pretty good cybersecurity analysts. Not the big hackers, but doing all the audits and the reviews and those kinds of things. You wouldn't think of that. So how can we give advice to people to help them understand what else is possible, so they don't have to feel stuck? They can feel there's an avenue that they can move.
Well, Salvatrice, I know you kind of have to work with the career services area. How do you see that evolving in the community college and in other higher education spaces regarding guidance and counseling?
It's a tricky question because it involves multiple players. It's not just the responsibility of career services, it's the responsibility of instruction, it's the responsibility of student services, it's the responsibility of our non-credit division. I mean, it's everyone's responsibility. I think for us, George touched upon the majority of career counseling and skills development within career counseling. But I think that one of the things that we often forget about is, the guidance within skill development also involves, being really honest and vulnerable about barriers that our students have and hesitations that they have. And particularly for community college, I'm speaking through the lens of a community college, but that plays a tremendous role in how we train and provide skilled, and when we're teaching and our teachings and instructions and everything else, when there's significant barriers and hesitations from the student. We know that what we fundamentally know, obviously, is that the skills we know really kind of articulate what we do, and therefore, puts us competitive and into a job. We had, like I shared earlier, we at Pasadena, develop these teams specifically for these meta majors so that we can identify the barriers and remove them, or get close to removing them, or provide them the support they need to advance in their educational journey and their career journey. And then I also think about, how do we as leaders or as educators, as employers, influence the curriculum design. That too is complex and clunky. We really got to rethink how we integrate work-based learning into our curriculum, because it really starts there. Like career development and career skills attainment, all these great things that we're talking about starts in the classroom. There's a continuum model that we know of, and but it really starts in the classroom, and it starts with that engagement between the faculty, the student, and the employer. So that's really that's where I really think about. And when I think about, like I said, the barriers and the hesitations, and then along with thinking about in classroom innovation with our curriculum design with work-based learning, I think that's where we're going to see significant changes, and that's how we are going to position our talent much more competitively.
That's great. Dorothy, I'm going to ask you a different question. Salvatrice's got some really interesting questions in the chat you might want to address, and one for all the panelists. If y'all take a look at that. Charlotte, I want to ask you about, kind of reading the market and satisfying demand, and this might be something the rest of you want to pile in on. I'm going to give you first crack, though. What's your experience, successes, failures in getting employers to identify and articulate the skills they want, and then you as a vendor, as a go-between, feeding that back to the institution to then respond and adapt their programs to meet that? What's needed to improve that beneficial feedback loop?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And as Salvatore said earlier, none of these questions can be, there's no silver bullet to any one of these questions, right? Because it's an intertwined kind of conversation that involves educators, employers, and the students themselves. Because let's be honest, students, I think particularly now, I think some of them are definitely feeling rather vulnerable in this marketplace. Going out into the marketplace and looking for jobs is going to be a tough ask, right? So I think right now, especially as the job market is changing significantly and has arguably changed significantly just in the last 3 months. And what we're asking for now, I think, as a society from education, is less the kind of traditional look at education and saying, okay, you're once and done type of education. We're asking the whole environment to shift to an ongoing relationship, lifelong learning, right? But that requires all players to play together, including the employers. And I think, not to pick on the employers in the audience today, but I think we need that engagement, right? The employers are not used to that engagement when it comes to providing more insight into how they want to develop their workforce for the future. What do they need exactly now when it comes to skills? They're used to, and let's be honest, like the job boards in general, they're a mess, right? It's, here's my job description, go figure it out, and hopefully we'll get some decent candidates out of this job description, right? It's hard to get down to the level of granularity that we're talking to today with most employers. There are definitely exceptions that recognize that we need to move in this direction, but it's not uniform at all. But I would say that we are seeing employers that are now willing more and more to share more about the skills that they're looking, the specific granular skills that they're looking to hire to, and provide feedback on the students and feedback on the students that they're seeing from various institutions in order to ultimately provide that feedback to the faculty and staff at that institution, so they can understand and be given more dynamic feedback from the marketplace as to what's happening as their students are entering the workforce.
Right. And George, I know you've had some barriers to that. Maybe you give it a quick idea of that. And then Teresa, I know you've had some successes. So just a short answer on these and we'll move to the next question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to come back to something Salvatore said, which is really important, which is that the students have barriers, both in terms of just time and money, but also in terms of aspiration, where they may or may not know what's possible for them, or may or may not feel they can get it. And so, for example, there are some amazing programs in photonics and robotics and advanced manufacturing coming out of community colleges and colleges, but so many students say, well, no, I'm just not smart enough to do that. But it's just not right. Similarly, that I was talking to the head of a plant in St. Louis. They're willing to pay $100,000 a year for electricians, but all the students are being told, you don't want to move into manufacturing. That's just a really bad place to be. So there's an awful lot to do, not only to let the employers know what they need, but to help the students understand this is possible for them, and these are good avenues they can go in.
Absolutely agree, George. And then the flip side of that too is that I think everything that we just said right now about employer engagement and the value that it brings to the institution so that we can better position our students. I also think about, we as institutions have to kind of remove some of those barriers with that employer engagement. There's lots of, streamline the communications. And educate our employers. Just as we educate our students, we have to educate our employers on how they can connect with us. There's different ways they can participate. There's just-in-time training for their existing employers. There's mentoring and advisory councils, and that's when we talk about curriculum design. Who better to tell us how to change or evolve our curriculum than the employers themselves, right?
And that really raises, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead, Richard.
No, that really raises the issue I think a number of you have thought about a lot, is that the role of the chief learning officer or the academic officer who's trying to shape their offerings today. And George, I'm going to lead off with you and say, how do you see that role changing? And how might that apply both to the workplace as well as to the educational institutions that are trying to respond to these more granular needs that we're talking about?
So for decades, the Chief Learning Officer, it is a relatively new title, but the head of learning and development, used to be the head of training. The learning and development organizations in companies for decades have had one role. They would ask, what courses do we need to offer? And the people would say, and they'd offer those courses. And they were just a budget line item. That role is going away rapidly. It's under threat. It's not respected. It's not where you want to go. We have a new article in Harvard Business Review just a few months ago called the Transformer CLO. There's a new model evolving in companies of learning and development as a strategic role. And it's a very different kind of role, but it's very possible. We're seeing it in many companies around the world. What this means is that the learning and development organizations are not just signing up to be trainers delivering a slate of courses. They're signing up to help the organization be ready to move. That means changing the way we think about what we're training, more capabilities, less skills. It means changing the way we do the training, more atomized, more personalized, more digitized than ever, and more immediate than ever before. And it also means rethinking the learning and development organization to be more agile and lean and peer training focused than it ever was before. It's a very different model. It's a powerful model, and I think it's the future of the model, but many learning and development organizations have not yet caught up to that.
And the community college perspective on that as well, and then Joel, if you want to add one more thing, and then we're going to open to audience questions here. I have more questions. If the audience doesn't have some, we have a few already in there. Please start putting your questions in the chat if you haven't asked them already. Go ahead, Salvatore.
I think about when I hear you ask that question, I really think about investments, and I think about investment in our institutions and really rethinking how we deliver our services. And that was, what George has mentioned earlier about that role is really, really important. It's still culture change and mindset change, which is very, very difficult to do. But our industry and our community will help us guide us through that. And we just need to be better listeners, remove barriers, the bureaucratic baloney, and just better listen to what is needed in our communities.
Well, I know, Jareth, I'll let you wrap on this and we'll go to the audience questions. That, I know you have a process, you sort of extract these skills from the curriculum as it's taught. Does it also drive more bite-sized bits of learning, more like what George is saying, more adaptive and responsive to the market, as well as being able to capture the value that's already delivered in a 4-year or 2-year education?
Yeah, it does. And what it does, I mean, this kind of crosses a couple of the questions that we discussed today, because what it does for the individual learner is help them understand that they're on the right path, right? They can see the skills that they're gaining through their education, and how because they're, I think it's fair to say that they're impatient to understand how this education maps to the world of work. And we have to make those connections for them. We have to explain it to them. And so as they're going through their education, what we do is extract that skill set and allow them to see you just earned these essentially micro credentials, these set of skills, by completing this set of coursework. And that maps into the job market. And this is, you're on the right path. You're pursuing the path you wanted. And now you've actually gained skills along that pathway. But just to the overall point around how do we make this transition? It requires a lot of work across both institutions and employers to understand that these conversations cannot be siloed. To Salva Teresa's point, they can't be siloed in different segments of the organization. You have to kind of break down barriers between kind of academics and career and workforce and even non-credit, because the conversation should be intertwined. So you as an organization become a learning organization and understand what the employers and the employers in the marketplace are looking for. So
if I can add just one more thing, it's really, we got to rethink of how we share our value proposition as educators, as employers. We got to change the narrative a little bit. We need to start speaking each other's language a little bit better. We need to simplify processes. We need to invest in our faculty. I'm a huge believer that we need to invest in faculty in professional development. And we need to be real. We need to have real talk about, these are, we can't be teaching the same program for the last 20 years and expect that we're properly positioning our students into newer and evolving occupations. It's unrealistic. And so we have to have those really hard conversations across campus. And employers too. Employers need to do the same thing with their existing talent and having those hard conversations, investing in their talent, redesign how they recruit, and really share the voice. Employers need to voice their needs to us, and we need to be better at listening.
Right.
If I could add in there.
Yeah, quickly, and we're going to jump to questions for now. Go ahead, George.
Practice really helps on this. If you can find one innovative program that somebody's developed that you can copy into your area, or if you can start an innovative program with an employer in one area, you can build on that. We are now building a program, just starting a program with the state of Massachusetts and the community colleges in the area to build up some advanced manufacturing training that with an AA degree, you can walk into a $30 an hour job rather than a $12 an hour job. And we'll start that in a few schools, then we'll move that to other schools, we hope, and hopefully make that available to other states. So the big systemic change, I agree, Salva Teresa, is needed, but every school now can find that one program, that one innovative thing to do with an employer or a few employers to get started and then grow from there.
And we had a couple questions. Flora, I don't know how to pronounce your name, and Julie asked questions, about the nature of occupation, staying in one job, also in training for meta groups. And it sort of raises this question about the landscape of skills and occupations. Has this trajectory changed, and maybe particular attention to what's changed during the pandemic and current economic crisis? How do you see occupations these days? I think is the questions being asked there by those two, and how to train for them.
I'll kick that off really quickly just to say that, I think the number that's generally accepted today is graduates from college or university today are going to have 20 different careers in their lifetime. So what that means from our perspective is it's going to be a very fluid landscape for skills as a student moves from their first career into their next career and their next career and their next career. And as George says, you're going to have to understand what skills you earned in your first career translate into skills that are valuable in the next career, but that next career could be in a different industry completely. So I'll just leave it at that.
George, Salvatore, anything to say on that? On the future of occupations? No, that's a big question, I know.
Yeah, one of the things we do, go ahead, Salvatore, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to share that really it's about agility. We had businesses that had to turn their operations upside down, new operations, new models, new customers, new ways of outreach. And we had to do this at a flip of a switch. And so those businesses that are excelling, it's not just, it also has to do a lot with the industries and what they offer, but the talent that they retained were the talent that were agile, that can adapt to kind of, high touch, high tech environments. And so I firmly believe that that's going to continue to be, that's going to be the norm. I mean, we know that IA is slowly but surely, eliminating some of those low wage jobs, and we're going to, middle wage to high wage jobs are going to still be there. But this particular global issue amplified it in a matter of months. And I think the agility is going to be key, and high touch, high tech.
I agree with you totally, Salvatore, that the best thing we can do as educators is to move beyond training certain skills and start to help people gain that ability to be agile, to grow, to change over time. Because one thing is guaranteed, whatever job they start in at 19 or 25 years old, they're not going to be doing that same job 10 years later. They need to adapt. If I could add just one more thing there, the whole idea of robots stealing our jobs was scary 5 years ago. As you look at where it's been going, robots are stealing some jobs, but they're mostly stealing pieces of some jobs. And so what that means is jobs will change, and people will need to figure out some additional skills to help them go with those changes.
That's right.
Agree with that completely. Jarlath, we got a good question in here, I think is yours to lead off on, in terms of, do we think employers are going to want to move towards a skill-based revenue. We all want skill-based revenue. Skill-based resume instead of a more traditional chronological one. And what's your experience with that? And how quickly do you think we're going to be seeing more of that as being the form that we see people projecting themselves into the market as a supply to respond to a demand for a job? You're on mute.
One of the things that we've seen in people say for like probably decades now is the resume is dead, right? But actually it's long live the resume, right? It's the resume is dead, long live the resume, because the skills, essentially the way we look at it is skills are embedded in resumes today. They're just not pulled out the way that we employers.
Oops, you froze on us here.
Pulling keywords out of resumes, and I think it's kind of incumbent on the job seeker and the education and environment and employers to say, well, a better way is to combine both the skills kind of articulation piece and the resume, the kind of the description of what it is that you did that demonstrates that skill. Like, what are the projects you are on, or what are the projects that you demonstrate that skill in, and use a combination of both skills and a traditional resume, a skills-based resume and a traditional resume to show that. I don't think traditional resumes are going away anytime soon, but I think we can adapt to a new environment where employers will appreciate and eventually require that as part of that document.
Well, we're up to the time where you're going to do a wrap up. I want to say that for all of you that are still on, thank you for all of you to the 120 of you that's still here. If you could drop into the chat what you think the real benefits of moving in some of the directions that we've talked about today are, like what would be the real benefit from your programmatic perspective or hiring perspective of actually having these kind of skill-based documents, valid evidence that would allow you to use it more easily. What do you think the real obstacles are? If you could drop some of those into the chat and share it with everybody, we would appreciate that. With that, we're going to turn it over to Jarlath for a wrap up and then turn back to Rhys for us to say a goodbye. So Jarlath, you're on.
Thank you. So I think what we've talked about today is like the as I think Salvatrice has said, it's a lifelong education journey that our students are on. It's particularly difficult now for students and even those adult students that are now coming back to institutions and saying, hey, can you help? I'm now unemployed. Can you help? And I think a skills-based system helps, as George said, helps a student understand where am I today in my skills taxonomy, my personal skills transcript. What does that look like? How does that translate into roles that are hiring today, right? And so we want everybody to go through this happy path of moving from one career to the next career to the next career, but there's bumps in the road, and that's what we're noticing today. There are significant bumps in the road for a lot of both students and adults today. So how can we make that smoother for those job seekers? What we do is we build what we call a skills transcript, and it basically adapts with the learner over time and can help inform the learner as to what skills they have earned, and builds with the learner as they both learn skills at their education, through their education, but also, as we know, a lot of skills are earned through work-based learning and work experience, and just in adapting with that learning. I think the word that was used a lot was agile or adaptive. So being able to help that learner adapt to the changing landscape of the workforce. So as I mentioned earlier, skills, we pull out skills out of the curriculum in order to help students express the skills that they're earning through each individual course that they take. And that can also include the human skills that George is talking about, those some people call soft. In order to help that student understand the skills that they're bringing to the table, to help the employer understand what the background to each individual skill that was earned, and to help that collaboration between employer, educator, and employer, and student, should I say. Of course, there's more that could be added. How do you assess, we haven't talked about assessment at all today, but how do you assess an individual student against an individual skill? Can you have faculty ratings or faculty assessment against an individual skill? We can certainly talk about that. But the goal overall is to help kind of ease the transition, and there's going to be many transitions for an individual job seeker as they look to get into the job market first, but then get into the job market again the second, third, fourth, fifth, 20th time over their career, and ensure that we can create that marketplace, a much more kind of collaborative marketplace between the job seeker, the education institution, and the employer to basically improve outcomes for everybody. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And we ended right on time. I'll hand this back to Rhys to do our final thank yous. Thank you all for attending, and to our panelists. We give a nice little round of applause to them. Thank you so much for all of you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you all.
Thank you to our presenters for a very informative session, and thank you participants for attending today's session. This officially concludes the webinar and you may now sign off.